So, how much of this is true? What historical basis do we have for this iconic love story? Well, unlike many of Shakespeare's plays, there is a good amount of source material on Antony and Cleopatra, because they lived during a time when Roman leaders kept really good records. We know quite a bit about the history of Cleopatra and Mark Antony from contemporary sources. So let's start there and see if we can separate the fact from the fiction. Cleopatra was born in 69 BC and died in 30 BC. Like the movie, she was the last active ruler of the Ptolemaic Kingdom of Egypt, which was founded by Ptolemy I, one of Alexander the Great's generals after Alexander's death in 323 BC. Though she may have identified culturally as Greek, she was of Macedonian descent, not Egyptian. Over the centuries, the Ptolemies intermarried with the native rulers, but by Cleopatra's time, there was little to no Egyptian blood in the royal family. Cleopatra learned the languages of the countries around her, including Egyptian, and established trade missions across the Mediterranean. She used her intellect and knowledge of other cultures to great effect, pretending to be a goddess to the Egyptians while appearing as a Persian to the Greeks, and speaking Aramaic with the Syrians. She built temples, patronized philosophers, and earned respect throughout the ancient world. Mark Antony, or Marcus Antonius in Latin, was born in Rome in 83 BC and died there in 32 BC. He was the second of three brothers, and his father, Marcus Antonius Creticus, had been governor of Cisalpine Gaul, the northern region of Italy that was inhabited by Celtic tribes. While Creticus was serving in the province, Cicero recommended that he allow Gaius Marius to adopt the youngest son, Gaius Octavius, and make him his heir. This happened in 76 BC when Octavius was 6 years old. From a young age, Octavius developed a close relationship with his adoptive father, the famous general and dictator Gaius Marius, and was largely under his influence. However, the two fell out of favour following the First Civil War between Marius and Lucius Cornelius Sulla in 88 BC, which resulted in Marius's exile. When Sulla returned to Rome in 83 BC, he executed Marcus Antonius Creticus, confiscated his property, and exiled his widow and sons. The boys were now penniless and without any real prospects. According to Plutarch, Mark Antony spent some time as a runaway slave to escape his creditors and was nearly killed by assassins hired by his father's enemies. Eventually, however, they were able to return to Rome after Sulla's death in 78 BC, and Mark Antony began to rebuild the family fortune. He went into politics and served on the staff of the influential consul and his father's friend, Marcus Junius Brutus. He also married Scribonia, the daughter of a prominent senator, and together they had a daughter named Antonia. In 69 BC, Mark Antony was appointed governor of the Roman province of Cisalpine Gaul, where he successfully put down a revolt by the Helvetians. He then served as a military tribune under Pompey the Great during the Third Mithridatic War in Asia Minor in 67 BC before being recalled to Rome. After being elected tribune of the plebs in 66 BC, he made efforts to improve the lives of ordinary Romans, but was blocked by the conservative Senate. Mark Antony was then appointed governor of Syria in 61 BC, replacing Lelius, who was sent there to quell a revolt. There he met Cleopatra for the first time. So how did they meet? Well, according to Shakespeare, Antony summoned Cleopatra to answer for Egypt as loyalty, after a group of Eastern kings complained that Egypt was supplying arms to those rebelling against Rome. Cleopatra could have easily ridden into Antony's court in a chariot and submitted to his authority. but instead she chose to appear on the deck of a ship as the goddess Aphrodite, complete with purple sails and a band of musicians. Obviously, this is all fiction, but the story goes on to explain why Cleopatra's image was stamped on coins minted in Alexandria. But how did their romance begin? In reality, this part is unknown. The earliest account of their meeting comes from Plutarch in his essay on Antony's life in the book Parallel Lives, and Plutarch's version is a lot more believable than Shakespeare's. In his version, Cleopatra doesn't show up in a fancy boat. Instead, Antony sends emissaries to her to test her wits. Plutarch writes that they proposed a riddle that would take cleverness to solve. They told her that one of them was carrying a torch and asked her to guess what it was like. As soon as she figured it out, the other would answer. After asking several increasingly ridiculous riddles, none of them were able to stump Cleopatra. And when it was time for the third envoy to speak, he didn't want to reveal the answer, so he offered her a kiss instead. Then he left. The next day, Antony came alone to see her, and that is how they began their relationship. It's important to note that we don't know for sure that the encounter in Plutarch's book is the actual first meeting between Cleopatra and Antony. It may have been their first meeting in person, though, and it does paint Cleopatra as more intelligent than Antony. Whatever their first meeting was like, within months of their initial meeting, Antony and Cleopatra were lovers, and together they planned to overthrow Octavian, Antony's adopted brother and Caesar's heir, and set themselves up as rulers of Rome. This plan failed. The two lost a battle off the coast of Greece and fled back to Egypt. Soon after, Antony took his own life, and Cleopatra faked her own death by allowing an assassin to stab her with an asp, or a type of venomous snake. Both were dead within a year of each other, and neither ever saw Rome again. Once we step outside of Shakespeare's play, we realize that their romance was a product of their individual circumstances. Cleopatra was trying to protect her country from becoming a Roman province, while Antony needed Egypt's wealth to build his army and win the civil war against Octavian. Cleopatra gained the upper hand in their relationship early on, declaring that she owned Antony's mind and will. Historians debate whether or not they had children together. According to Suetonius, Antony did not recognize the twins Caesar and Cleopatra until they were adults. If they were indeed his, this would make Cleopatra's children legitimate heirs to Caesar's title. That's why Caesarion is often depicted with a crown in art. The play suggests that Octavian drove the lovers apart by stirring the Romans against Cleopatra and Mark Antony. In reality, though, Antony broke ranks with the rest of Caesar's heirs, turned against Rome and declared war. The Battle of Actium in 32 BC was against Octavian and his forces. Cleopatra didn't exactly flee the battle. Her ships left because they had to. There wasn't another ship in the entire Mediterranean that could have transported her and all of her treasure. Octavian destroyed most of her fleet and captured Alexandria a year later in 30 BC. So it wasn't fear that sent Cleopatra's ships fleeing. It was realism. You either stay and die, or go and live. The Romans only remembered that Cleopatra left the field. The real reason behind her decision was lost to time. Unlike in the film, Antony wasn't fighting alongside Cleopatra when she died. He'd already taken his own life after learning that she had apparently died. Ancient historians describe him as having done so after misinterpreting a letter that she sent him saying that she was ill, and that if he didn't come to her quickly, she would surely die. It was actually an attempt to get him to help her fend off Octavian, but Antony believed that she was dying, and he didn't understand her handwriting. He jumped on a horse and rode as fast as he could towards Alexandria. But he never made it. Instead, he found a sharp rock, laid his throat across it, and plunged a dagger into his neck. One of his servants found him the next morning. Horrified and confused, left his body where it was and returned to Alexandria, where he was publicly humiliated by Octavian. We also need to talk about the infamous coin scene in the film. Coins were never minted, showing Cleopatra's image on one side and Antony's on the other. According to Plutarch, Antony minted coins bearing the images of both Caesar and Cleopatra on them. But these were only struck to celebrate Caesar's return to Alexandria in 41 BC, 2 years before he died. And they were likely a gift to Cleopatra. These coins are now known as Alexandrian tetradrachms, and though they bear the images of Caesar and Cleopatra, neither ruler is portrayed as a god. The coin was likely a wedding gift to Cleopatra. Cleopatra's choice to kill herself is probably the most debated aspect of her life. Most historians believe that she allowed herself to be bitten by an asp, a type of venomous snake. But there are others who believe that she was injected with poison, possibly by a member of Octavian's staff, who snuck into her bedroom in the middle of the night. But this theory is unwidely accepted because it's hard to imagine how someone could sneak into the room unnoticed, especially since Cleopatra was attended by servants day and night. Plutarch also wrote that she drank a vial of poison, but this is unlikely because it would have taken hours to kill her, and she wanted a quick death. Finally, there's the story that she held the asp in her outstretched arms like a torch, and welcomed death like a friend. This may have been a theatrical way to die, but it's hard to imagine that it would have killed her quickly. According to the historians, she was dead within an hour of being bitten by the asp, which is a pretty quick turnaround time. Ultimately, Cleopatra and Mark Antony weren't just lovers. They were strategic partners whose goal was to control the greatest empire in the ancient world. While Shakespeare gives us one of the most famous love stories of all time, other writers offer a very different perspective on their relationship. Thank you so much for watching.